Hey everybody, this is Matt with mathsmath.com. Thanks for joining us here today as we check out solving proportions. We're in the Math Common Core standard of ratios and proportions, and today we're going to analyze and use those proportions to solve real-world problems. Our guiding question we're going to answer today is how can you solve proportions that don't have easy-to-see connections? You'll be able to answer this by the end of the lesson today. You see, most of the time when we look at proportions, there's something not so quite simple as this. You have a 2 here, and you might have a 4 here, right? How do you go from 2 to 4? You multiply by 2. Well, how do you do that when you've got 2 to 7? That's pretty ugly, isn't it? How do you go from 2 to 7? Well, if you think about it, that might happen when you're making some bread or you're making some cookies, and you might have recipe calls for 2 eggs, and you might want to make enough for 7 eggs. You got 7 eggs in there. How do you what do you do to the recipe to make it go from 2 to 7? Well, that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to be solving proportions, all right? You ready? Let's do it. Well, what if they're not so nice? Solving proportions using mental math or multiplying can be easy most of the time. But what happens when it's not so easy? Like this guy. How do you go from 25 to 10? Or from vice versa, 10 to 25? Not so easy, isn't it? Well, you might try by getting rid of the 25 there and dividing by 25. Well, you're dividing by 25 there, so let's multiply by both sides by 25, right? If we multiply this side by 25 to get rid of the dividing by 5, really, because that's what a fraction is, right? Dividing by 25, if we multiply by 25, we multiply the other side by 25, and we can solve there. And then we can see a clear way to solve for x. Let's do it. So if we have 3 over 10 equals x over 25, let's solve for x. Multiply both sides by 25. Let's recap. Remember, this fraction bar is a division, and you're dividing by 25 here. So I don't want x divided by 25. I just want x. So if I have x divided by 25, I multiply it by 25. What is multiplying by 25 and dividing by 25? What does that become? Well, that just becomes 1, right? Those go away. They cancel. So really, all you're left with now is this x and this 1. It's just x times 1, which is 1x, which is good. And then what you're going to do over here is you're going to multiply now 25 by 3/10, right? 25 times 3/10. And you see what you get. Remember, it's a fraction times a whole number, so we got to put it over 1. Multiply just the 25 by 3, and there's a 1 underneath the 25 here that's invisible, so the 10 stays on bottom. So it's 25 times 3, which is 75, and then 10 stays on the bottom. And then you're doing 75 divided by 10. Reduce it, and you get 7.5 equals x. All right? So that's really the best way if you are struggling with how to see the connection. How do you go from 10 to 25? Well, that's not so obvious, is it? Well, cross multiply. Really, in the end, what you're doing is taking that 25, multiplying it by the 3, and then dividing it by the 10. Cross multiply and then divide. That's the way out of writing proportions, okay? Not really much different than we've done before. We're just cross multiplying, okay? All right, well, if we've got k over 6 and 8 over 16, let's solve for the variable here. It might not be so obvious how do you go from 6 to 16, but there's a simple, quick way to solve for this guy. I would much rather use the easier method first than having to cross multiply and divide. So for example, here you might not see how you go from 6 to 16, and you might want to cross multiply 8 times 6 and then divide by 16. But if you reduce 8 over 16 first, and that's 1 over 2, then you can see how do you go from 6 to 2. Or how do you go from backwards 2 to 6, which is times 3. 1 times 3, that gives you k there is 3. All right, so that's, remember, don't forget to go back the previous way. Now this one, a little bit harder. How do you go from 5.4 to 27? Not so nice, is it? Well, what do? We're going to multiply 7 and 27. We're going to cross multiply the two numbers that we can multiply, okay? So take that 7, multiply by the 27, and then we're going to divide by 5.4, the other number. Multiply the two numbers you can multiply, and then divide by 5.4, and then you're good to go. That's your answer. Like this one. We've got 20 up there, 8 down below. How do you go from 20 to 15, or how do you go from 15 to 20? Not so easy, is it? Do you see the easy way first, to reduce? If you didn't reduce 20 over 8, and you still cross multiplied 8 times 15 and then divided by the 20, you're still going to get the same answer. Either way is going to work fine. Some of you might be able to pick up on these connections of simplifying the fraction first, but definitely cross multiplying and dividing will get you there every time. That's the surefire way to get you to the end. Okay, you could have reduced first, and if you did, solved it, you get x equals 6. All right. Why don't you try these guys on your own? You got 5 over 2 equals 4x over 8. And then you got 8 elevenths equals 4 over x plus 2. Now, trick with these guys here is you're still cross multiplying and dividing. Still cross multiply the two numbers you can multiply by. 8 times 5, and then 2 times 4. So notice 2 times 4 is 8. 8 times 5 is 40. Simplify, and you'll get your answer like this. Dividing by 8, so multiply by 8 on both sides. You get 40 over 2. Well, 40 over 2 is 2. Right? So that's 20. 20 equals 4x. Well, 1 times 4 is 20. X equals 5. Now, there's quite a few other ways to solve this too. If you think about it, how did you go from 2 to 8? Multiplied by 4. So 5 times 4 is 20. 20 equals 4x, which is what we got right there. So again, you can cross multiply and divide, or you can divide and then multiply. Let's look at the next one here. You got 8 and 4, x plus 2, and 11. How do you go from 4 to 8? How do you go from 4 to 8? That's multiply by 2. To go backwards, you divide by 2. So you got to get the other way. 11 divided by 2 gives you x plus 2. Here's the work for it. Notice what I did here. I put the 8 on the bottom, the 4 on the bottom, the 11 on top, and x plus 2 on bottom or on top. You can do this. You can flip them around like that. No big deal, okay? And again, we're dividing by 4, so we'll multiply by 4 on both sides. We'll get 44 over 8, x plus 2 on the other side. 5.5 equals x plus 2. Bring that 2 over to the other side, and you get x equals 3.5. Again, if you did, how do you go from 4 to 8? Multiply by 2. To go backwards, you divide by 2, so what's 11 divided by 2? 5.5, and that's what you got there. All right, try this other one, this next one, on your own. Remember, cross multiply, then divide, and you get your answer. All right, how you doing? Are you able to answer the question of how can we use proportions to solve real-world problems when you can't see easy-to-see connections? I bet you can. Well, that's it for today. Got one last problem for you. Want to think about this? 2 tablespoons to 7 tablespoons, 5 cups to how many cups? What's that going to be? Making a recipe there, you end up having 7 tablespoons. How many cups of flour are you going to need if you got 7 tablespoons of butter? Again, cross multiply, divide. How many cups? Well, that's it. I'll leave you as you go and make some yummy cookies, I bet. You're getting so hungry. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining us. This was Matt with mathsmath.com. Check us out on Facebook at Solving Maths Problems, or on Twitter at Maths Math. And enjoy math and cookies.